right, here we are. Well, welcome everyone to our meeting, our April meeting. Hi, Florencia.
Hello, everyone. Sorry, really late.
Hello.
I'm gonna link the agenda for the recording. And we start as usual with a request for the approval of the last meeting minutes. They are up on our GitHub repository. Please do have a look. If there is anything that you'd like to amend, please do so, and we'll merge it as soon as possible. So we thought today's meeting could be the occasion to review and discuss together the recently published paper on ROS2. Congrats, guys, for publishing it to a fine conference.
Yeah, let's hope it gets accepted.
Yeah, well, the paper is sound. It's don't see why it wouldn't be.
Yeah.
So we thought to organize this meeting as a study group, a discussion group around the paper itself, but also everything it implies, what comes next, I guess. But I'll leave the floor to Florencia. Florencia, if you'd like. She's been studying closely the paper, and she's prepared a few directions for the discussion. Go.
Yes. Yeah. So again, congratulations for putting together this paper. As we all know, it goes in the same direction as the group has been pushing to promote usability and adoption of ROS2. So that's pretty great and very well aligned with our work here. So basically, the proposal, was to have a short discussion around the paper. I know several of you are very well familiar with it as authors, and some not, but we put together some discussion questions in the agenda just to guide discussion. Doesn't have to be limited to this, but basically taking in the direction of how can this work help promote usability and adoption of ROS2, for example, as a first question. So I basically throw in this reflection question, and I guess maybe you have some insights or some ideas on how you plan to make this happen. So whoever wants to jump in and share some ideas on this, it's very welcome.
Rafin, Gianluca, do you guys want to go first?
Go ahead, Victor. That's fine.
Don't fight, guys.
Rafin, it sounded like you wanted to. Okay, I'll just throw a few thoughts. So, well, first of all, I wanted to actually say that this is awesome. So thank you, Florencia, for taking the lead, and also thank you, Jeremy, for empowering all of us with this. I think we should definitely have more like study sessions like this. And if this is kind of like an open topic that's of interest, then I can suggest a number of papers that I've been collecting and reviewing, and a number of authors. I know a bunch of them actually would be excited to jump into meetings and maybe give a short talk or share their views. So happy to coordinate maybe this on the side. That would definitely trigger, I think, interesting security discussions, which are, in my opinion, very much of interest to this working group's activity. So yeah, and regarding the first, cool. All right, so let's discuss that maybe in the chat or on the side. Happy to help with that. Regarding the first question raised in here, and by the way, I like the questions very much. I especially have a few thoughts of interest on the last one, and I actually I am glad that this came up, and I think this can trigger cooperations. So I will wait until we reach there to drop a few ideas. But regarding the first one, well, in the paper, essentially, as you can see in the title, we pretty much focus on usability. One of the biggest concerns we have received over quite a few years now, or at least that I have received while speaking with industry using ROS and considering to use ROS, is essentially that it came to quite a challenge to start using ROS in a secure manner, specifically because the guidelines or the lack of guidelines first that came as a constant concern. Second, because the documentation wasn't as maintained as probably some customers or users may want it to be, and this is certainly our fault. But also it came down to the fact that after a number of years working on, thank you, on this topic itself, we realized that actually most users weren't quite addressing the major concerns from a security perspective, not so much because they didn't want it, but more because essentially they didn't have the facilities to do so. And that's how it dives down into usability. This is articulated nicely in the introduction of the actual article and of the actual paper. And it all boils down to actual reason. If you think about cybersecurity, and that's part of what I'm doing in my day job, actually, these days, and if you particularly look at cybercrime, you would notice that actually 90% of the attacks include non-exploits. That means that the technical complexity of these actual attacks in the real industry out there don't really involve much technical complexity. And it's just a matter of training, conveying the right information about security practices across the whole supply chain, and particularly robots as a major target increasingly. So that motivated us very much. And also I think motivates the straightforward answer to this question itself, which is how can we help promote more usability of SROS2? And I think one of the answers we came up while doing this work was by trying to propose a methodology that helps steer security processes from cybersecurity engineers all the way to roboticists while confronting robotic setups. So that is a first that comes to mind, at least to me, but I'm sure Gianluca and Rafin may have more comments. A second that I would say is that while doing this, actually, we identified lots of interesting opportunities that maybe we just didn't reflect enough to consider, and that writing them down actually helped significantly. This is written particularly in the paper in the 5th section, in the conclusion. And we really had like a decent, I would say, brainstorming on the side of this group, where we threw some really nice ideas on what we think might be interesting to improve the overall usability and usage of the tooling, of the tools that SROS2 is all about. And some examples include, for example, things such as including more capabilities to introspect computational graphs. This is at the bottom and at the core of the security processes themselves. Things such as maybe extending some of these tools, not necessarily just to DDS itself, but also to embrace other communication middlewares. We're increasingly seeing how some companies are actually replacing the middleware that lives below the ROS middleware layer, RMW, and how this is going to get more and more importance as again, we confront more and more difficult use cases involving potentially many more attack vectors and entry points for attackers. And the last thing I would mention is, which I think it's definitely something that Rafin and Gianluca have been thinking a lot about, so I credit them back on this, but it's the idea of this graphical user interfaces, which I think syncs very nicely to some of the, in a way, complaints I think we received in this working group in past meetings. I'll just stay at that, and I'll let Gianluca and Rafin maybe add more details. But hopefully this adds a bit into that question, Florencia.
Thanks, Victor. So the two kind of points I'd like to kind of hamper on that maybe touch on the questions here is some of the blocks are the measurement. So that's sort of the foundation of how we want to improve the usability here, is to try and automate as much as possible. And so we can aid the user in generating an accurate policy to try and offload as much of that as possible, but that's limited to how accurate we can measure the the computation graph and what permissions are being used and how to audit. And so we had, two ideas. One was to improve the ROS graph API so that, it can give us analytics on the more temporal interfaces, such as action clients and such. And the other one is logging. And I think there was a push a while ago to improve the security logging feature set. So if we had either of those two kind of buffed up, then we could build upon that with more tooling to kind of auto generate the policies. Going forward, it also says like good.
Sorry, Rafin, if I may interrupt you just a second before we change topic. I'd like to very quickly address the 2 points you've raised already about mapping the graph, and that's somewhat tied to the user interface you're mentioning. This is also the idea behind NoDL, right? So NoDL is a declarative topology of your graph, because each and every ROS communication agent, if I may say so, in your packages, and because thanks to the launch file, you know beforehand. And when I say beforehand, I mean right before runtime, the ROS graph at the end, up to some exceptions. With NoDL, you're able to generate on the fly the policy. And this is already working for very simple examples. We are looking at putting together a much larger example, making use of NoDL, a more complex and compelling example. But we are working in the same direction there. And I do believe that based on NoDL, we can put together this user interface. I was actually looking at the interface that they are using on the navigation working group. So they have the so-called GROOT software, which is a nice graphical interface to put together your behavior tree. And I do believe that we can reuse at least some of this software, the GROOT software, but instead of putting together behaviors and a behavior tree, you would put together a ROS graph and its policy.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry, just to quickly bounce back on the second topic you raised about logging. Yes, we did push the logging feature, a security logging feature in FastDDS. This exists and this is working, at least the last time I've checked. This feature is at the moment only logging to a TXT file, and we are looking at extending this feature to be able to log also directly on the DDS graph.
So the NoDL, I'm cautiously optimistic. Though when I was doing some more recent experiments with either the navigation stack or the move it stack, I was trying to build an entire policy there. It's pretty challenging in that a lot of the developers are now migrating. There was a lull where there wasn't any XML-based launch file, any static launch files. So then, Python became sort of the de facto, and that's like a fully Turing complete language. And so having to interpret that to figure out, I'll have to check the current status and how you're extrapolating what interfaces are being used purely from the launch files, but it does seem pretty ambitious. And so one thing that might be also good as a sanity check is to still have the measurement tooling to kind of validate your node DL as well. So make sure your node DL doesn't miss anything or it's out of sync with respect to the current code base. And talking about current syncs, that's something I also noticed. Gianluca has a master's student that is sort of tasked to kind of implement SROS on one of their own projects. And one of the things they encountered was a pretty large desync between the current documentation and current implementation. And I think that's sort of an inevitable symptom of open source development and acceleration and how fast we move. But I think it's also a case example for motivating, sort of moving users away from having to know the nitty-gritty details of how the policy documents are formulated or what are the particular common interfaces the node needs. So rather than users being exposed to all the intermittent representations directly and having to carefully document those in our tutorials where they then quickly fall out of date because the ROS graph has a ROS info topic that's what ROS uses to inherently announce what interfaces are. You have to take into account all these weird, strange permission changes between RMWs. You should really push for like a graphical interface that's what we document, and then all these abstractions are sort of hidden away, and we're less likely to encounter end user issues where they get confused and lost in terms of a disconnect between implementation and documentation.
Absolutely. And that's why also we've decoupled the idea of NoDL from security itself. NoDL is just, a declaration of your ROS interfaces for a given package.
But I would like to touch upon that as
Please.
well. What you were suggesting before is using something like the MDE, the model-driven engineering tools with NoDL. So you just create the blocks and the tool automatically generates the NoDL rules. Because otherwise, as Rafin was saying, it may be challenging to have something correct. If you remember, we stumbled upon the same problem when we were discussing during Florentia presentation this. The NoDL have no way of being verified. And that's why we stress about the graphical user interface and some introspection tools for the graph, since in some of our previous work with Rafin, we were applying formal methods to discovery data from DDS, and we found some problems in the way policies were generated because we were verifying directly on the graph rather than the logical aspect of the system.
So yeah, I would second that. So sorry, Jeremy, go ahead.
No, so from my perspective, there is no one solution that's going to be perfect, right? You can listen to the graph and miss some temporal connections, such as actions or the likes. You can have a declarative solution like NoDL, and still you're not going to capture everything because of, plugins. That's at the moment the blind spot of the NoDL solution. There's no one perfect system, right? So we do need, and I do agree with you that you need some measurement tools, validation tools, but even those are not going to be perfect. What this stresses is that at least we need some development tools to assist debugging a policy that's not perfectly fitting your graph. Now we are discussing about the same thing, alleviating the difficulty of writing a policy for a given graph, and we are both parties proposing different solutions, but they are not mutually exclusive, and they are not. Neither are perfect, right? They are complementary.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah,
I
go
definitely
ahead,
see
Rafi.
there's a space for where they're all just sort of integrated, where you use the measurements to take a raw and accurate sample of what are the interfaces on the graph topology, and then that gets backported into what NodeDL is like processing, because the thing that NodeDL will know is like which nodes were started and how the nodes are composed, and so it can take the particular interfaces that nodes have been using, do the association on which interface is being used by which process, and then probably then it's the best fit, and then maybe NodeDL has the best abstraction on how to communicate the particular permissions, and then ROS then later, it's going to use that to boil it down back again to the permission. So we're kind of doing this this around the bush kind of avenue, but that's the way to probably handle the abstraction that based on the communication layer we're using. It definitely seems like they work together in that sense.
So I just wanted to add my 2 cents in here, and I agree with what both has been said by actually the previous 3 of you, Gianluca, Jeremy, and Rafi. And I just want to add my views in here, maybe taking a couple of steps back and sharing with the group some of the observations that I've taken, and that some of my other colleagues in ADS Robotics take pretty much every day when we speak with customers, real industrial players in industry considering ROS. And the reality is that designing complete security policies remains a real challenge with ROS2. I'm not just speaking about using 1 or 2 of the tools that ROS2 features, but overall designing the security architecture, the complete 1 or multiple security policies to partition properly a robotic application. And frankly speaking, while writing this paper, even the terminology needs to be polished and improved. If you map all of the public documentation about security throughout the ROS space, you would find even inconsistencies, something we ourselves face throughout our discussions while putting together this content. So overall, to be honest, I was really happy to see this happening, an early discussion about our contribution, because that fulfills our initial objective, which is awareness. That's what we wanted to somehow push forward, awareness and consistency for what concerned a security talk. So I am excited about that, and I just want to hint about this fact that there needs to be much more that we need to do. I'm personally very excited about NodeDL and the opportunities. I agree about the fact that maybe NodeDL can set up a base template that then can be improved by real data measured while the graphs are evolving and running. And frankly speaking, hopefully this is something that we can embed. Actually, and I'm going to jump into something that excited me while reading the question that I think, Florencia, you prepared, which was, I think that the last question reads as something like how can NodeDL contribute in a way to this ongoing proposal and framework and methodology overall? Well, I mean, we are totally open to actually enhance the current article and add maybe as part of the use case that was studied, an NodeDL extension. Actually, I would love to review such a pull request contributing to this repo. We've been contributing for a few years now, since 2019, with the use case on the Article 3. And frankly speaking, there's even academic opportunities there, because to be very honest, the paper was submitted to ROS, but reviews are still to come. And maybe as part of the reviews, you guys know that sometimes resubmissions or even the reviews for final submission include some additional contributions. So I'm super open to actually consider that if we as a group, and particularly thinking of you, Jeremy and Florencia, if you guys can squeeze a bit of your time and make a contribution to this repo that we've been using, and I can fetch the link for you now if you need it, but it has been public for a few years now. So if you can add some bits over there about NoDL on how it can add actual value, which I think it does to the current proposal, I think that's the sweet spot we want to reach, because frankly speaking, at the end of the day, the major complaint that I keep hearing from users is that there's simply just not enough security talk, and that people is kind of like waiting to start believing that ROS2 is secure. And this is what we are trying to convey over and over, that there are definitely ways to ensure security at the ROS2 level. So is that something that can be done, Florencia and Jeremy? Are you guys open to maybe contribute to that existing code?
So I guess so. We at Canonical, we are finishing currently our 2204 cycle, and in about a month we'll start a new cycle. And in this cycle, I do expect to be able to allocate a good chunk of time for the implementation of the reference robot. Right, I'm keeping this generic and open. This can mean a lot of things in reality in terms of workload. But the end goal, at least, would be very clear. We want to have a reference implementation of ROS2 secure robot. The means to get there are to be discussed, and I put together a very small document for you guys to have a look, and this is why we are having these discussions as well. So yes, we will have some allocated time dedicated to security in ROS2.
So I know. Just quickly responding to that, I know you guys are looking into the Turtlebot 4, and I'm totally okay with that. I just want to maybe drop a comment with regard to the fact that so this repo that I just shared, the Turtlebot 3 demo, which if I'm not wrong was originally started by Rafin and Mikhail, and then later on contributed by various of us over the years. There's a significant amount of effort and many hours behind this. And it took lots of effort to reach this level, and it is still taking lots of effort to maintain it, as far as I know. So I guess the reason why I was suggesting that is because this sounds like the lowest hanging fruit to really bring back to the community value for what concerns a security set of recommendations, while including NoDL. Whereas I guess my fear is that if we jump into a new platform, it may take, I don't know, some time for us to land into the same situation. But I'm personally blown up by how much Turtlebot 4 is getting in terms of media and excitement. So you guys might be right selecting that target.
Yeah, that was one of the main motivations behind picking the Turtlebot 4. Now we're also picking Turtlebot 4 because this Turtlebot 3 repository exists, and you guys already put a lot of effort, and hopefully a lot of this can directly translate to the Turtlebot 4. Just concluding about
the bit in it being Turtlebot 3 is purely, I think, just because the simulation assets were there and mature. But now that it's sort of been lapsing in terms of porting to the latest version of ROS, it's fine, because the stacks, what we really want to demonstrate is this land, the navigation. If we had a robot arm, but the robot doesn't have an arm, to demonstrate that holistic using the rest of the ROS ecosystem. The platform isn't super specific because they're usually just sensors and actuators. That's my feel on it.
And that's where I was going to conclude. Implementing the NoDL for the Turtlebot 3 most likely would be shared will be sharing 75 or 80% of the effort with Turtlebot 4 because they are both using plain ROS packages, right? So implementing NodeL for, I don't know, the diff drive controller would potentially benefit to both, or implementing NodeL to the navigation stack would benefit to both and the wider community.
So stepping back, or Victor, is like maybe we get the bigger picture. Did anyone have any comments or commentary on the on some of the other more problematic paradigms that are inherent in ROS? Like one of the things is if a robotics designer wanted to take security really seriously in terms of like information flow control. Let's say that that's a robot manufacturer, OEM. They have certain liability constraints, but they're integrating with a consumer-based subsystem. Obviously, there's going to be some overlap in terms of where the consumer's, product sits on top of the robot's OEM, and they're going to have to share, certain topics or information space, like, transform trees being, a pinnacle example. One of the things is that transforms are inherently, necessary in the ROS ecosystem, and they're usually conveyed over like single topic or maybe two topics, T/TF or /TF static. And you could, provision, only read permissions for maybe the client, but, let's say the client sticks a robot arm on top of that, then they need write permissions. And so then you have this really weird overlap of where's the source of truth, and nothing's really restricted based on the integrity, authenticity of the transforms being published over this monolithic transform topic. I think that maybe there may be a case there that, well, maybe they should just be on different DDS domains and you should be using bridges and stuff like that. Or, is there a more elegant way that ROS should be approaching, security at that granular level? Or is that inherently out of scope? Maybe that's some of the questions I had in terms of what we should be doing forward in terms of security group in the ROS community.
Yeah, I'm not sure to fully capture your example. So if I'm a company buying a robotic base for developing my own solution, a robotic service of some sort.
Well,
at the end of
the case is that you may not own the entire robot, or you may not be liable for the entire robot. I mean, the future, I think we're seeing a lot of robotic use cases like autonomous cars, is it's the robot as a service.
Right, but at the end of the day, someone owns the development of the overall platform, even though you're reusing some bits that were provided by the
That's not the case
audience.
I've seen. There's like autonomous cleaning robots, right? So this is something. There's a startup out at San Diego, and they kind of retrofitted a floor cleaning, stand-on platform that's kind of manned and made it unmanned. And at the same time, they allow third-party integrations where you can stack on a surveillance system. So now the floor cleaning robot is also a security, monitoring system. Security in the sense of just like personnel and surveillance. That's a sense where you're leasing. The OEM is sort of leasing the platform, and the platform could hurt someone, if it ran over a child or whatnot. But it's not completely decoupled, and that's also integrated with various add-ons that the end consumer is adding on top of the platform. So if the entire platform ends up running over a child, is it the malicious third party add-on that was hacked? Are they at fault, or is it the is it the OEM that made, their drivetrain unsecure because someone was able to change the transform tree that the map, changed so it collided with a personnel. So I know that's kind of niche, that particular example, but I think extrapolates where you have like ClearPath as designated specifically like selling like these base platforms that then people build on top of as an ecosystem. And it's kind of
Right.
hard to decouple this ecosystem if everything is on this unifying network or yeah.
Right, and that's where I was going at. If you buy a platform with some software, you can either have a tight integration. Your extra application runs on the same ROS graph, in which case you do have access to the entire integration, and you should be adapting the policies and the whole security story to take into account that you have yourself the hand over the entire graph. So maybe the OEM can provide you with some kind of a template policy or something just to help you get started or develop faster. But if we are considering a single ROS graph, then you have the hand over everything, and you should make sure that the entire graph is secure. If you are adding a simple security camera to an existing robot that's already fully autonomous, then maybe you don't have to integrate to the pre-existing ROS graph. You know what I mean? You may have two different graphs, and if the first graph provided by the ODM is already secure, then you only really have to secure yours.
So you're saying that we should really just the ecosystem should really just rely on gateways to declassify or endorse information across these security barriers.
I'm not sure. I guess it
Yeah,
depends
yeah,
on how you develop your system, right?
I think what I'll have to do is I'll have to maybe extend my thoughts and write this up a little more. And it's probably not good for a drive-by question, but if some thoughts I had, I'll revisit
Circle
it.
back to that.
Yeah, nevertheless, I think the baseline discussion in here points out towards the fact that having more use cases is going to be a beneficial aspect for the working group to be reasoning about more and more complex integrations. So on that, I definitely second Jeremiah with your efforts on trying to bring this to more and more robots. So I think that's going to add value to it, and hopefully that'll trigger more complicated and complex discussions. So yeah, looking forward for that. So maybe, and that I think brings it to the second question that I think, Florencia, you prepared about how can we actually maybe apply part of our findings or hypothesis to some of the ongoing work on securing robots. Right? Did I get it right? Or maybe I just misinterpreted?
Yeah, correct. So I was actually going to mention, in the interest of time, we have like 10-ish minutes if you wanted to jump to the next discussion. So, and we touched on the third one already on ODL, so this will be sort of our last question to touch on. And yeah, that's exactly it. As Jeremy mentioned, we are prioritizing development of the reference robot in the next few months in our roadmap. And that's a joint work with the group. So I personally, when I read the paper, I saw a lot of value for integrating with the reference robot, especially because, well, you're also adding this framework as a guidance to its DevSecOps inspired framework to secure robots, besides obviously promoting the technology itself. So I was curious to hear how you think it might be also incorporate it into our plan for reference robots, maybe?
I think that is a great question and indeed opportunity. So I think there's direct translation of what we propose to the actual security process of a new robot. And in this case, while tackling the Turtlebot 4, because you guys are tackling the Turtlebot 4, not the iCreate base platform, correct?
That's the idea, but I believe that most of the Turtlebot 4 development is based on the iCreate code base.
Yeah, I mean, it's totally the base, but I'm guessing that ClearPath's going to add a few more things otherwise.
Of course.
So with that in mind, Florencia, I would say that there's like most of the actual approach, like section 3 in the paper, is directly applicable, especially in and I would say in a chronological manner, in the sense that you start actually doing proper modeling, then you connect that to actually determining how your policy should look like by, I guess, establishing the right authentication, authorization, permissions, and somehow transfer that down in the right manner to the right mechanisms that ROS2 allow. Then it comes down to the generation, and that is something that definitely deserves more attention and contributions, because right now generation and distribution of the policies is mostly manual, and that is okay if you have just one, I guess, compute system within your robotic system. But the moment you have like multiple SOCs or distributed over a network, then it becomes a bit more complicated. So that is something definitely that maybe might lead to contributions. And all the way down to deploying things, not just generating them, deploying them, and then doing constant monitoring to feed it back then to any further improvements while modeling things again over. So one of the ideas we had discussed within this group of authors, we aimed to submit this, was how could we actually transfer this into the existing ROS2 documentation? And maybe that is something you guys can comment on as the working group leads. So what is the best way to bring this down to the community? Is that by bringing it as a new project to the working group called, I don't know, methodology for securing ROS2 computational graphs? Is it by contributing to the documentation? And if it is that, then where? Because it seems to be a spread right now between the official docs maintained by Open Robotics, the design documents. It seems a bit messy right now.
Yeah, and really you're putting your finger on the larger topic of ROS2 documentation, which everyone I know complains about.
So security-wise, what is your take, Jeremy and Florencia? Security-wise,
right.
where would you think this should land?
So at the moment, I think it should land in the ROS2 documentation, the documentation website managed by YOR, simply because that's the current default. When there is a better solution, we can revisit that. But at the moment, that's the central point of the documentation. To answer your question as to what's the best way to bring that to the community, I tend to think that it's simply a tutorial, a step-by-step tutorial where you try to secure a small but compelling example of a ROS stack, and a step-by-step clone these repositories. That's how you're gonna organize your ROS stack. This is what security is. This is what security does, and that's how we are securing this particular stack. What we've seen from our own documentation for non-ROS products, but also from our company blog, is that this is the kind of document, the kind of content that generates the most traffic. More than 2 years ago, I wrote a very small tutorial on how to write a new CLI verb for ROS2, and to this date, it's still very, very visited, right? So I do believe that's the kind of content that's the most appealing to the community, tutorials.
On this end, actually, just to give you an idea, the total listener example on SROS, it's broken. It's wrong. The one from the demo nodes repo, sorry, the packages from SRF, it's broken. It's not correct.
What do you mean?
If you take a look at the documentation and if you try to run the sros command directly on the packages of the demo nodes, the artifacts and the policies that are generated are wrong. They're not correct.
Nice.
That's a problem.
Well, why isn't there an issue upon them?
I was just
Please do
reviewing that.
report
I was
this.
like, I've seen the documentation is on rolling, it's not on galactic, on their wiki, and yeah, I have to open the issue, and I was speechless. I have to say that.
Well, it's the difficulty of maintaining documentation, and it's as Victor pointed earlier, this has been difficult always, especially now that rolling exists.
But I think to Gianluca's point, and I agree with you, Jeremy, and there's no way to disagree with that if you're a developer. But I think it goes beyond documentation, guys. And I think we should be looking at things in a way where we acknowledge and reckon that security is way beyond just a series of tools. It's just way beyond SROS2, which is a series of tools. And we start embracing this attitude of the fact that if we want to convey the right security message, if we want to convince industry, regardless of the marketing we do, regardless of how great tutorials we write, but if we want to convince industry that ROS2 is secure and can be made secure, then we need to really start adopting this holistic approach wherein we start maybe as a group and as individuals, put maybe more emphasis on things like what Gianluca is highlighting, things such as what Jeremy is highlighting as well, and many other pending aspects about communication. I think writing tutorials is definitely something fantastic, and we are counting on you guys from Canonical on maybe pushing the edge on that because you have tons of marketing experience there. But to be honest, I'm increasingly receiving this input about the fact that it is more and more challenging to convince people that ROS can be made secure. And it's not because Open Robotics doesn't advertise it is secure. Certainly they are, but because the actual security attitude doesn't really match with how other industries are approaching security in the sense of policies, of conventions, and so on and so forth. So so I guess and maybe I diverged a bit, but this is very connected to my daily work and to my daily interests. And I think it somehow can be tackled in a way by addressing properly this second question, Florencia, that you pose in here, which is by applying a systematic framework or methodology and showing the way and showing maturity from a let's say methodology perspective manner. Because if we just recommend people that adding security with ROS is just about using SROS2, then nobody's going to take us seriously. And I'm confronting this in serious security conferences where literally people's asking really good questions. So I guess maybe embracing more this methodological approach, while of course very connected to the DevSecOps overall movement, which seems to be the common trend right now in security, is definitely a way forward. And Florencia, I'm hoping that our writing in here sheds some light into how to start applying this methodology. If it doesn't, feel free to reach us out or ask, and we may have some spare cycles to actually help you guys set it up in the Turtlebot 4. For now, it is set up in the Turtlebot 3, and it is working as far as we have tested. So hopefully that also paves the way for future extensions. I think you also asked about contributions to other working group projects, but I'm not really sure what you meant with this.
Who mentioned that? Did I?
Nobody mentioned it. Sorry, it was written in the minutes at the end of the second bullet point, big bullet point. It was written or contribute to other working group projects. So I was.
Oh,
It's just this way to write it. It's referring to the secure reference robot or other projects of our own working group. Sorry, I'm missing S.
No worries.
Yeah. Like you mentioned, this framework is very intuitive. It's very straightforward to apply to any project, really. And the way I saw it is as a way to introduce developers who are still not using security at all, but may find accessible to think in a DevSecOps way, which is, it's graphical. It's like a set of very clear steps that make sense in any security setting. So I don't think it's going to be difficult to incorporate it. I guess it's the question was more like how this framework is going to be pushed or promoted for adoption. Just like you mentioned, I mean, the discussion is present in conference and all over, and that might be a good way to get into or to get more developers to start applying such frameworks. So
I think that is very interesting what you've just said, and I guess it takes us to actionable aspects right away, right? Which I'll bring right now. The first one is how can we bring this work that we have published or aim to publish to an actual project in the security working group? And I defer to you, Florencia, and to you, Jeremiah, to try to activate this. I can commit to put some of my personal time if we can bring finally one more project to the security working group besides the ROS tooling. You guys know, or you can check the past pull requests that I've been pushing to get more projects. I would just say once again, I think we need more projects. We need to get more people excited and also encouraged to contribute in one way or the other. It cannot be just one single direction. And then I would say, Florencia, to your words, which I fully agree with, the fact that it aligns with the DevSecOps and the way it's phrased, it's not just about introducing non-security aware people into it. It's also about conveying the right message to security aware people. The message wherein security is not really a product, that you license or acquire and then you're secure. Good to go. Come on. Security is a process. It is really a process wherein collaboration between security researchers and many other stakeholders, including manufacturers and end users, is a must. It's needed down the road. And this is really not being conveyed in the community and somehow, hidden or avoided in many discussions that we see publicly, even in ROSCONs. Let's be honest. When was the last real security talk that happened in ROSCON? Last year, there were very little security talks. The year before that, very few security talks. And that actually gets me to something that excites me very much, which is asking for a security talk this year, please. So if there is anyone actually excited about doing a security talk with us, because I know Gianluca and Rafin are excited, please reach us out. Reach me out if you want. Florencia and Jeremiah, if you guys are up for adding maybe, that was what I was hoping. If you guys are up for maybe, you said 75% of an overlap. Well, that means that it might not take too much to add then no-DL to the existing TB3. So if you guys were willing to maybe take that step, I think it would be exciting to partner all of us together and maybe, bring a joint talk for ROSCON. But yeah, I would just say there's a lot to do, and I would love to see more projects.
Right. So to quickly answer your point about ROSCON, that's precisely what we are targeting with the Turtlebot 4. Then whether it is a talk or a demonstration on the side, a series of lightnings, I don't know. My only concern is what will be the content of this presentation and what novelty can we bring with respect to previous talks. But definitely that's what we are targeting with. That's our deadline with this reference implementation idea. We want to have a fully functional, secure robot to present at ROSCON. So we are running out of time. I believe we have somewhat already addressed in our discussion the third bullet point. Florencia, correct me if I'm wrong.
Oh, you're correct. And
Great.
it's been a great discussion. So we went over time without even realizing. So that's a really good sign. It's better than we expected. So yeah, if you have any more like final comments, Jeremy, go ahead.
So I would make two small comments. First, I'm just throwing you guys a small peek with love, of course. You're not mentioning as far as I can see, you're not mentioning the security working group as a working group in your paper. That's a missed opportunity for bringing people along. You are though giving all the links to the GitHub repositories and whatnot, so no doubt that the reader will eventually find out about it. The second thing is a more open question, and it's not meant to be addressed right now. It's what's next, right? So we, for sure, are going to allocate time for the reference implementation. We seem to more or less agree on the overall path. The Turtlebot, fully secured for ROSCON, and all the documentation and blog posts and tutorials and whatnot that will accompany this. So I guess I'm gonna focus a little bit more the question, what's next in terms of scientific production or papers? I don't know if you guys have thought about making a paper for the software open journal. What's it called? JOS, the Journal of Open Software.
I think that's a great suggestion. And I think that, and I'm just speaking here just on my behalf, but I presume that maybe Rafin and Gianluca might be in agreement, but it would be great to cooperate with more of you guys. And I think this is exciting, especially if we add more and more value to it. I take your point about not mentioning directly the security working group, Jeremy. I think you're totally right. And that's, it's surprising none of the four of us realized that, because I think we've been here, well, for a very long time. I think we're part of or if not the eldest within here in terms of attendance. What I can say though, in our defense, is that in every single communication we made across social media and communities, we definitely tried to bring people to the security working group. But I take that as really, really positive criticism, because we should improve that indeed. And on the what's next, I like a lot that suggestion. Why don't we take it maybe offline or to the chat and try to bring some ideas on what else we could aim for other submissions. But in terms of content, I would just recommend everyone to have a look at the conclusion section. There's especially the last paragraph, I think, has really interesting ideas. So those of you managing teams or having resources to put students into work, some of those thoughts we believe are interesting, and some of them are actually really low-hanging fruits, which can bring significant value. So yeah, well said, I would say, Jeremy.
Great. So let's take this talk, this discussion offline, and that's it. Well, we are reaching the end of our hour. Thank you all for attending, and I guess we'll see you next
Good
month.
seeing you.
And much earlier than that on the chat.
Cool. Thank you, Florencia and Jeremy, for managing.
Yeah, thank you all for attending.
Yeah, thank you for a great discussion too.
Thank you very much, guys.
Ciao, ciao. Bye, Rafin. Bye,
Thank
Gianluca.
you.
Bye, everyone.
Ciao.
Bye-bye.
Bye.